Welcome back to another episode of Eddie's Balcony Garden, and today we're going to be talking about soil. I've been growing now for about 1 year, and I was growing everything in pure compost, which has definitely a big amount of advantages, but there are some drawbacks which were exposed to me in the later stages of the season. So when you grow things only in compost, what's going to happen is that the soil is going to retain a bit too much moisture, and the roots aren't going to have enough access to air. Yes, believe it or not, roots need air to grow properly, and that's where this comes in. This is perlite, and if you've looked at any kind of potting mix, you'll usually see that it's a mixture of this kind of brown dirt looking stuff, and it's got a bunch of these little rocks in here. Now what perlite is basically volcanic rock that's been processed and popped like popcorn, so it's even more porous and holds even more air than regular volcanic rock does, which already does that very well. So when you add this to the soil, you're basically introducing a bunch of routes for air to kind of be held in that soil. So let me go ahead and show you the difference. So this right here is just regular compost, and if I try to add water to it, I think I'm going to need a little bit more water than that. So you're going to notice just how much water I can add to this, and it's just going to keep taking it and taking it and taking it. It's going to drip out of the bottom eventually, but you know, in a couple minutes that's just going to get reabsorbed, and I think that's already been like a good 5 liters of water, which it's just going to take. And the problem is that when you have soil that retains moisture that well, you end up with situations like this. I watered this potato plant here, I think yesterday, and look at that, you can still see exactly where I was watering it, which is, you know, just not great. You want that top layer to dry out relatively quickly, and you want that moisture to be nice and well distributed within that soil. So we'll have a look at this pot at the end, but just note that the water is coming through the bottom right now. I'm not going to touch it, but you're going to see how that water gets reabsorbed later on. So when you go ahead and add perlite, you're also solving that issue. So it's a two-pronged solution. On the one hand, you introduce a lot more pathways for the roots to actually grow throughout the dirt. They're not running into hard compacted stuff all the time. And on the other hand, you're actually making your pot absorb water in a better way, because inside it's got places for that water to pool and slowly be released into the dirt. You're not just relying 100% on the dirt itself retaining all that water in one go. It's got some time to let it like seep back into the soil. So I'm gonna pull out a container over here. Bam, I've got the perlite here, and of course we need compost, which I've got a giant bag here, which is honestly very heavy. I reckon that's at least about 30 kilos. So you're gonna ask me, what is the ideal mix actually? Well, generally you wanna have about 20% perlite compared to the rest of your dirt, and your dirt might be a mixture of compost and peat or whatever you want. In this case, all I have is pure compost. So I'm gonna go for about 70% compost and maybe 30% perlite. I might even drop that to just 20% perlite. So let me go ahead and grab a bag that's already open, and I'm basically gonna fill this container about 2/3 of the way, maybe a little bit more, with this compost. So as you can see, that's now about 2/3 of the way full. I haven't compacted that at all, so actually that compost is gonna even go down a little bit, and I'm gonna add the perlite on top. Now they do recommend using a mask when you're working with perlite, so when I go ahead and I make a bunch of containers in one go, I am gonna do that, but just for one, I'm not gonna use a lot. It's fine. Don't be too crazy about it, guys. Let that dust kind of settle a little bit, All right, and there we go. So it's a little bit dusty, you know. I do recommend wearing a mask if you've got one. Let's face it, we've all got them after. But here we go. And after that, it gets really easy. You just want to mix this all together. And you can already see that kind of starting to combine nicely. And what I'm looking for is to have like a really nice distribution between the two. And I'm actually really surprised that that compost that I still had in that bag is looking as good as it does, because that compost has been sitting there for, I guess, something like 8 months, and it's still got liquid in it, and that bag's been kind of open. Maybe I had the opening down towards the bottom, but we're getting now to basically the distribution that we want to see. There's a lot of compost, but you can definitely see the rocks over here. So once we get to this point where you're quite happy with how much it's been distributed, you want to give it a really, really good watering. So that's what we're going to do. Now, I did notice that the perlites just come on top, and that's going to be because the compost it's more dense than the perlite is. So when you add water, it is going to come up to the top, especially if this hasn't been watered properly in a long time, like this soil hasn't. But if I remove just a little bit, you can see that right down there, it's not distributed well. So once you water, it's going to be a good idea to just kind of give it another mix. And this time, it should be the last time you have to mix it together, because now it should kind of lock in that distribution. All right, here we go. That's a lot more like what we want to be seeing. And over time, as you water it, the perlite might try to come back on top, but once you've got a plant in there and it starts to get roots really nicely kind of distributing itself, you're not really going to have that problem, because the roots are going to lock everything in place. So I'm going to go ahead, kind of use my hand and just compact that just a little bit. Actually, I'm compacting it quite a lot, but as you can see, we had almost filled this container, and now we're down to, I don't know, that's a pretty significant drop right there. I'd say 1/4 of the container has just dropped. So I'm going to be a little bit sneaky, and I'm just going to throw a bunch of compost on here, which is just going to act as a little bit of a barrier for that perlite coming up. It's going to have an extra layer that it would need to go through, and that's just going to buy my plant a little bit more time to really establish the roots and lock all that perlite in. So and so there we go, guys. That's perlite. That's what the benefits are. That's kind of how I try to mix it in, about 20-30% perlite to dirt. So with this new, better, and improved soil, which is perfect for containers and pots and all that kind of stuff, I'm expecting this harvest this year to be even better than the one I had last year. This year, I'm really exploring to kind of grow as many different varieties to get that experience under my belt. Next year, I might do a self-sufficiency journey in my small balcony space. So if you're interested in that and you want to see how we progress, please go ahead and subscribe and like this video and check out the other ones. And back to the pot, as I promised. If we look carefully down there, it's still some water. But if we look here, I mean, there's still dry spots, which is absolutely insane. So all that water is going to get sucked back in. I'll send you another picture in about 15 minutes of what that looks like. So thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a thumbs up and catch you in the next one. So I'm just quickly recording this on my phone, but as you can see, if I dig under here, that soil has not taken any of that water in yet, so it's going to absorb all of this stuff and it's going to be nicely distributed in a bit. But with the perlite, I'm not going to have that problem. Woohoo!